Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we've got Facundo. How you doing?
Hey, how are you, Jason? Everything cool here?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Super excited to have you on the show. I am looking forward to we're tackling something pretty challenging today. But before we dive into what that is, let's talk a little bit about you. You want to give everybody a bit of an overview, who you are, what you do, all those good things?
Sure, of course. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Facundo Giuliani. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm a developer relations engineer at Storyblok. Storyblok is a headless content management system that, we will use it today. So we will go deeper into that later during the session. But yeah, developer relations engineer. During these last couple of years, I was involved in the community, creating content, sharing content with the community, speaking at events,
Hmm.
virtual events, now in person that they are coming back. I had the chance to met Jason in person in Atlanta in last June. But yeah, before that, I spent several years of my life, I would say like 12, 15, I really don't remember, being a developer with different technologies, front-end technologies, back-end technologies, a lot of things that brought me to this place. I mean,
Hmm.
not only developing and creating products, web projects, applications, but also talking about them or seeing the content that we can create to share with the people. So yeah, super excited to be here.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we are talking today about personalization. And so personalization is one of those things that we hear thrown around a lot, but I don't even know if I know exactly what it means. So for folks who aren't familiar with the term, what do we mean when we say something like personalization?
So, from my point of view, I would say that when we talk about personalization, we are talking about offering different experiences to the people depending on certain aspects.
Hmm.
I mean, not necessarily speaking about web development or web projects, right? I mean, in general, in life, you also get personalized experiences. Let's say if you go to a shopping mall, for instance, and you
Hmm.
go to a certain store because you want to buy some T-shirts, and you enter by yourself to the shop, you will have the people working at the shop that probably they will see you and see that you are looking for a particular T-shirt. You go, you buy it, and you go out. I mean, you pay, of course, but you go home after that. But if they see that, I don't know, a family enters there with a couple of children, let's say, and they start talking about that, or they start seeing the different products that they are selling, probably the seller, I mean, the employees from the shop, they will come to the family, offer support, asking about what they are looking for. So the question is, what's the difference between a person that goes straight to the T-shirt that they want to buy and the family that is taking a look there? Well, this difference in the treatment, let's say, of the
Mm,
employees of the shop, we are talking about personalized experiences, right?
right.
Well, I mean, that's an, I don't know, an analogy that I like, or that I, or another analogy that I like, that you probably see that, if you, I mean, if you live in a big city, you can see that. But if you live in a small town, you see that more frequently. Is that if you go always to the same coffee shop to always get the breakfast or always read the newspaper while
Hmm.
you are drinking coffee in the morning? Okay, you go once, you go twice, you go another time, and etc. And after 10 times, I mean, probably the waiter or the waitress that is working at the coffee shop, they will say, "Hey, Jason, how are you?"
Yeah,
The same as
yeah.
always. The difference than if you go for the first time, so again, personalization, like seeing I mean, differentiating the users or the customers by different aspects and offering them different experiences based on that, right?
Right. Yeah. I think, you bring up something that I think is important because when I feel like a lot of times when we start thinking about like customized web experiences, because of all the different ways that it get abused, it can feel like, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I don't want to track my users. I don't want to do this or that. And that's such a bummer, because I love that experience of walking into my local coffee shop and they know my order, and it just makes me feel like I'm in a place that's mine.
Yeah.
And that feeling of personalization, of that, this is a place where I am a regular, and it's a place that I choose to be, and I want it to feel tailored to me, simply by my usage. That feels really, really good. And so I think when we talk about personalization, there's definitely a way to make it evil, right? We've learned that every good innovation will eventually be used for evil, and that's really a bummer. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we should never use these innovations. So today I want to focus on the good uses of it, which are, how do we get a website to think about what is my usual? I'm coming to your website. How do you make me feel like I've been here before? Like it's the experience is tailored for me specifically. So I guess maybe that's a good question for you. How do you do that on the web? How do you make me feel like I'm seeing the same person behind the counter who remembers my order?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, we can base on different aspects of the person browsing the website. If we are talking about a web project, for instance, um, but I mean, going more in generic terms, let's say, I mean, you can see, for instance, the location of where
Mm-hmm.
the person is browsing your website. To give you an example, I mean, I see that you are now in t-shirt because you live in the United States and it's summer, but here in Argentina, down in Argentina, we're in winter. So if
Right.
I mean, for instance, offering personalized content is like, if I enter to a website and I see a sign that says enjoy the summer now, it's like, okay, I have to wait like 6 months to do that,
Right.
So like getting the location of the person that is visiting it gives you that possibility. Another cool thing is, for instance, showing the weather to the person that is entering to a website. You can show the specific weather for the city where that person lives in. Speaking about this, you going every day to the same coffee shop. In a certain way, you need to keep track of what that person is browsing, right? I mean, what's the preferences of that user when
Mm-hmm.
browsing your website, which pages the users are visiting, which products they are buying, probably talking about probably more familiar case, these e-commerce platforms that I won't name them. But if you go, I mean, you start to get suggestions about previous
Right.
purchases that you did. So it's like, I mean, you can keep track of certain things depending on how you implement your project, depending on how you build your project. You will have certain ways or other ways, depending on how you prefer to store that information. You will have that too, and depending on how you track that information will depend on that, right?
Right. Yeah, I think and it really opens up a just kind of a fun dev problem. If you think about, like, how do I make a website useful based on somebody's behavior? And there are little signals that we get, like, okay, so I show up to a website for the first time. I've never used it before. You're going to give me a set of defaults, right? Now, without me ever having visited that before, if we're able to figure out what country I'm in, you've already mentioned a great option, which is like, okay, I'm coming from a country that is currently in summer, so show me a summer scene. Or like based on the weather, if I ran an e-commerce site that sold rain jackets, you could just build a personalization that's like, hey, the current weather in your area is rainy, so I'm going to say, hey, it's raining outside. You want 20% off a rain jacket? Like, you could just
There
do
you
little
go.
things like that make it feel smart. And that's before you ever even know this person. So then as they do things, if they log in and give you information, like, I am a business owner, I buy wholesale, I'm, just shopping for a gift, whatever it is, each of those things is a detail that if I was in person, I would change the way I was talking to you, because now I know more about what you're interested in. And I can kind of,
Exactly.
like, I think about the fact that when I was when I used to run my agency, the first question you would ask anybody who called about a project was, okay, well, what are you looking to accomplish? And then they would start telling you about their business, and they would tell you about like what what their problem is, and what numbers they're trying to change. And you start to get this bigger picture. And then the next sentence out of my mouth was never the same sentence twice. It was always like, okay, well, based on what you said here, here, and here, I think we should focus on this. Here's an area that I want to dig into. And it would personalize like what I'm trying to offer them to the problem they're trying to solve. We can do that through a conversation, and the conversation can be interactions on the website. And you can make that really heavy handed. Like when you sign up to a new product and they're like, how many employees are in your business? What what is your primary use case? And you have to check all these boxes as part of onboarding. But there's also like, just like, I clicked on the men's clothing. That's a point in the direction of men's clothing as being my primary interest. So, maybe just bubble those items to the top of the list. And then if I then go and click on women's clothing twice, now I've been 2 points for women's and 1 point for men. So we'll just bubble women's up now. And now, like we can do it behaviorally without having to track anything or ask for any data. That stuff is fascinating.
Yeah, sure. And in fact, sorry, 1 minute, but you mentioned something that is very important, or that for me it's good to mention, that personalization is not about like when you talk about how intrusive you are, or how am I watching your steps, to say that. But on the other hand, what you can do is explicitly get those details, like, okay, where do you live? As you said, how many employees does your organization has? And you can ask for the details. And then if I'm asking you those details and you are answering them, it's like, okay, we agree that information, you are able to share that with me. So now that I have this information, I can do certain things about that.
Yeah, absolutely love that stuff. Like it's such a, I don't know, it feels like it's one of those things that it feels out of reach, right? So actually that's a good dovetail into talking a little bit about the tech here, because in my logical mind, I understand this is valuable. I know that if I've got somebody coming who is shopping at a store that I own, they are more interested in some items than others, assuming I have a store with categories of products. I know that if somebody who likes hats sees hats, they're more likely to buy something than if I showed them soap. But like, what is the technical underpinning of this? Like, what are you using to make this happen?
Well, that will depend on how you want to set up your project, or which tools do you want to use, let's say. For instance, going to a simple way of keeping track of these kind of things or details. You can create cookies in when a person is visiting your website, and in those cookies you can store the information related to them. You don't need a database for that. You don't need a platform to keep track of all the visitors. On the other hand, you don't need the user to create an account, for instance, to keep track of that information. You just create a cookie, like I would say 100% of the websites do, but not 100. Let's say 95% of the websites do, like keeping track of certain parameters, and based on those parameters, you can show some content or do something,
Right.
or not the other, right?
Yeah. I mean, and you use, like, cookies are pretty common for all sorts of things, not just personalization. So the likelihood that somebody is going to be okay with a cookie is pretty high. Like that's why we all have to check those accept cookies banners on every single website we visit. And again, like, there's always a spectrum here. You can use any of this stuff for evil, but the vast majority of use cases are pretty good here. We can make your experience better if we just keep track of these little details that aren't personally identifying. And I think that's a big important point, is like, we're not building a user graph or anything. We're literally just saying, like, oh, you clicked on this, that's you showing interest, so let's just kind of focus on that a little bit. And then if you click on two other things, and we'll oh, those are now part of your interest as well. So our ability to make suggestions just based on behavior gets really good. And if you sign in, and if you have like a purchase history, we can make better recommendations, but we don't have to do that. Let's talk a little bit about use cases that aren't e-commerce? Because I feel like this has a broader scope than just like help me buy the products I want. How else have you seen personalization used around the space?
Sure. Well, I mean, an example that probably is more familiar if you are on social networks is you see, I mean, let's put an example, Twitter. The tweets that you see when you open the application or the website, you will see first probably the
Mm-hmm.
accounts that you are more familiar with or that you interact more with, or speaking about news portals, for instance. If you go, I mean, if you always go to the same news portal and you read certain types of news or related to a certain category or topic, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, if I show you, I mean, if I always enter to the same news portal just to read about sports, I want to see the last matches results, let's say, and I don't read any news about politics, for instance. Probably it's not that I'm not interested in politics, but I'm more interested in reading things related to sports, right? So I would prefer that when I enter to the website,
Sure.
instead of seeing the first news or the first articles related to politics, it will be more interesting to me that I see the first articles related to sports, or
Right.
how was the NBA yesterday, right? Those are other examples that I think that are not e-commerce or actually e-commerce.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I'm even thinking about like just general usage around, you know, like a dashboard or something, right? If I go into a dashboard and I switch it to dark mode, then like remember that across other parts of your app. Like if you've got an account dashboard over here and then you've got another website that's like your docs or something, like carry that preference over, just personalize. Okay, I've chosen that. Like now I've shown you as a company that this is a thing that I like. And
That's
or
true.
if a code company who like Netlify, for example, we have code samples in JavaScript, TypeScript, Go, a few other languages. And so like, what if we just remembered that you always choose TypeScript and then we'll default to TypeScript instead of making you choose that from the dropdown every time? And that happens across everything, right? There's just these little things that you can do that just make the experience so much better. I think this is
Yeah,
one of the
sure.
reasons that people love the Stripe docs, for example, is when you go to the Stripe docs, their code samples don't have that like insert API key here. If you're logged in, they just put your API key in there.
There you go.
Like Airbase
There
does
you
this
go.
really well too, where Airbase doesn't give you generic docs, they give you specific docs for your table generated from the schema of the table in your API key. So you just go in, copy paste it, and it literally works. You don't have to copy paste your code in or switch out a key or adjust it for your particular data schema. It's just there. It's work. Oh, you want all the entries from this row, copy paste this thing and it'll work in your app. And that is such a nice setup compared to some of the ways that, you know, we just get used to like manually personalizing things. We get a code sample or a copy pastable like ready-made message and we always have to go and do little edits and change out, oh, I got to do the replace the first name here with your first name and replace the your name here with my name and all these different little things that are just, you know, they're not hard, but it's just these little taxes that you pay as somebody who's not using a personalized experience. And we can always
Yeah.
feel that polish when we go into a website that does the extra work to solve that problem for you. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, like
Yeah.
I feel like I as people are watching this, I just want to make sure people don't get themselves into this mode of, well, this is only useful if I work on e-commerce. No, this is useful everywhere. Like this, I feel like this
Yeah,
is the
sure,
secret
sure.
sauce, right?
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's not that you can't do that. I mean, it's not that you are not able to grab a piece of code and add your personal details, but you feel better, right? And that's what you want to do when you are creating a product. Not only selling products in an e-commerce platform. I mean, that's, you want the people using your product to feel happy and to choose your product because
Right.
they enjoy using it or doing it, right? I mean, going to the analogic world, let's say, the same example. I mean, it's not that if you go to the same coffee shop over and over again, you can't open the menu and say, okay, I want this flat white with this piece of cake, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if you enter and they say, hey, Jason, how are you? Do you want the flat white with this piece of cake? And you are like, okay, I mean, this is my place. I'm feeling happy because of this.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, providing value or satisfying the needs of the people. Because I mean, going probably to an extreme point of view, but when you have a lot of offer in the market or in all the aspects of the life, when you have a different options or different alternatives to a certain product or a certain way of doing the things, those little details are the ones that are going to make the difference compared to other platforms, right? I mean, I'm not
Right.
saying that you will stop going to that coffee shop if they don't call you by your name. But when you have, I mean, if in the same block you have 5 coffee shops that enter into one that says, hey, Jason, how are you? Do you want the same flat white that you took yesterday? It's a difference. I mean, so,
Yeah, it's
something to consider.
it's definitely a differentiator. Like I think in my own behavior, I know that I will definitely select the shop that makes me feel like a regular. And sometimes that means going to the place that I actually don't even think is like the best particular, like I might like the coffee better at one place, but they clearly don't remember who I am, and they're like, they're pretty standoffish, and they think they're pretty cool, so they don't want to acknowledge that I'm in there all the time. But then the next coffee shop over is pretty good, not great, and it's just one of those like, I'll take the slightly worse coffee if they remember my name, they treat me well, they make me feel welcome. Like, I love that, and I think this is such a maybe an underrated thing on the internet, because people think of the internet as being like a brochure. Like, I have created a thing and I'm going to set this out in front of the world, and anybody who wants to can read it, but it's one thing. And we really sell ourselves short when we think about websites or web experiences as brochures like that, because what we really have the opportunity to do is make our website into a caring guide that is actually seeing somebody coming and saying like, hey, I have something that might be of value to you. With a couple of pieces of information, I can swap what I'm talking about and make it relevant to your interests, not like a megaphone that's just blasting an ad that's really generic. And it's such a big difference from a billboard to somebody who will kind of say like, hey, you look like you're interested in like it's like a billboard for a piece of clothing, as opposed to being in the store where that salesman will talk to you about like why that piece of clothing is special and how it will work for you specifically. And like that, it's subtle, and it makes such a huge difference.
Yes, for sure. I agree. Completely agree.
Okay, so this is probably a good opportunity to switch over and do a little bit of actual coding. So let me switch us over into the pair programming view here, and I'm going to bring over this window. All right. So today we are doing live captioning like we always do. Thank you to White Coat Captioning. We have Rachel with us today. Thank you, Rachel. And that's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, NX, and New Relic, added on the show. So thank you so much to all the sponsors. And if your company is sponsoring, I got one more slot, so hit me up, y'all. We're talking to Facundo, who is on the Twitter. And I'm going to have to actually search your name because I always get it wrong. Here you are.
Yeah, I have the... That's me. Yes.
All right, let me drop this in the chat. And if you want to follow along with the live captioning, that is on the homepage, learnwithjason.dev, as always. And we are going to be doing some personalization with Storyblok today. So let me drop a link to Storyblok. And that is the extent of my knowledge. So what should I do first?
Nice. Cool. So, well, as I mentioned before, Storyblok is a headless content management system that you can use to, well, actually create content and manage that content in the projects that you are going to create without using a particular presentation layer or front end
Mm.
layer. So you can, the same content that you create once, you can use it in different channels like mobile application, web applications, and etc. But besides that, I mean, you can select the technology, sorry, that you want to use, because you are going to connect to a particular API and bring and consume the content from that API.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's technology agnostic. You can use the technology that you want. The cool thing about Storyblok, or two cool factors that Storyblok offers to capabilities, let's say, is that Storyblok offers a real-time visual editor. So if you're
Mm.
working on a web project, for instance, using the front end of the application that you are creating, I mean, the actual code of the front end of your application, you can offer to the people that is working with the platform a real-time visual editor where they can see how the content that they are creating is going to look like. So probably if we are developers, probably this sounds like a cool thing, but it's not uh, a big feature as it is for content editors, because the content editors, they don't want to um, ask to the developers for to generate a particular preview,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always an added value to see the content that you are creating and how it is going to look like based on the logic of the front end that you are using. And again, as we mentioned before about personalization and the differentiations, it's like it's probably a friendly user interface for you, having a visual editor where you can see the content that they are creating and how it's
Mm-hmm.
shaped, instead of having a form where you are filling details or the different fields of different properties or of different field types, and then you have to somehow generate the preview for that. So I would say that one of the cool features of the Storyblok is this real-time visual editor. And the other cool feature that Storyblok offers is that it organizes the content in using a component approach. So you can
Mm.
create component structures inside the headless content management system, and you can manage those components in the same way that you use in a front-end front-end framework or front-end technology that follows a component approach, like for instance React. So you can create component types or block types, as we call them in Storyblok, that you can reuse them in different parts of your project, in different parts of your page, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to redefine the same content structure over and over again, right? So you
Yeah.
can use that same component type that you created in different parts of your page. You can use them inside other components, so you can create a nested architecture of components. And basically the idea is that you can organize the content
Right.
with these reusable components, but on the other hand, you can link these component structures that you are creating in the content management system
Gotcha.
with the components that you are using in the front end of your application, right? So you can create a component called call to action, for instance, and you can link that call to action component in the platform, in the headless content management system, with the visual representation of the component, which is probably a React component. So you will know that all the call to action blocks that you are going to use in the content that you create, you are defining the same or logic or the same presentation for
Okay.
them using React components, for instance.
Great. Okay. All right. And I see let's see, Ben just showed up and sub 23 months. Thank you, Ben. You are almost 2 years old on the Learn with Jason channel. That's very exciting. I see Coding Cat in the chat gifting subs to Anthony. Anthony, welcome to the Boop crew. Make sure you spam the heck out of those emojis. Stefan, I see you in the chat. What's up? Lots of familiar faces out there. What up, everybody? And it also looks like we are very close to a hype train. So if anybody's feeling gifty, today's the day, y'all. So yeah, let's do it. Let's go ahead and actually start coding, right? So is my first step here. I think I already have a Storyblok account because I did an episode with Samuel back in the day. So let me see if I still have this. How do I?
Let's see.
Oh no. Are you gonna let me in? Oh boy. I do have a Storyblok account. No. Confirm your
Almost.
email address. Okay, so resend my confirmation email. Apparently did not ever confirm my email, but that's okay. So I'm going to open up my email in the other window here, find my, here's my confirmation instructions. Copy this link, come over here, do one of these. Okay, so now I got to log in. Try that one more time. Hey!
Yeah.
All right.
There we go. Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to do personalization. If I can spell it. There. Okay, so I've now created a new space. What do I do from here?
Okay, so well, this is an empty space. We have only one story. That's how we call the items in Storyblok, the content items. And then you have a list of, let's do this. Do you want to be part of an experiment? Do you want to see something new, something cool?
Yes.
Okay, no. Don't be scared. Don't be scared. I'm asking because the Storyblok product team is working on the version 2 of Storyblok of the application.
Okay.
And we are releasing it in August, the 2nd of August. And there's a public beta, so we can switch to the version 2 and we can play with it. I'm saying an experiment because if you find any issue while using it, it will be a very welcome feedback. But I hope it doesn't appear if we have a bug and that everything works smoothly. But we are, I mean, the idea is that we release the version 2 of Storyblok. We are announcing it, but the first days of August, so it's pretty soon. And yeah, we can use the new interface of the application, right? The new user experience. So cool. Now we are in the same space with the new options, let's say.
Gotcha.
In the content menu, we can see the different stories or the different content items. These content items are organized in folders as like the file system of your computer. And this story in this particular case is the home story, which is the like the home page of your website, right? When you open it, you can see that this pre-generated page has a teaser and a grid on the right-hand side. Those are the components of our page. And then on the left-hand side, we have the real-time visual editor that I was mentioning before. You can see on the top of the page that there's a URL there, and that URL is pointing to where the code, where the front end of our website is living. I mean, if we are hosting an instance of the front end of our application, there's where you can point it. The visual editor is basically an iframe, so you can browse any page there, even your local host. So if we are going to work on your local host creating the project, you can see that inside there. I mean, configuring this preview URL, you can point to the local host of your computer. If not, if you have deployed your project, you can do that. You can use it too. I mean, if you are deploying to Netlify, for instance, and you have your preview instance or your production environment, even it's cool that you can set different preview URLs in the case that you want to verify that the content is looking good in the different environments that you are managing. You can add more than one preview URL, so you can test the different environments of your application.
Nice.
But yeah, basically, what we have here now, I mean, if you don't pay attention to the visual editor because you didn't configure any front end or you didn't connect to any application, what you see on the right-hand side is very similar to what we have in other content management systems. Is basically the content that we want to create organized in components. You can see the teaser component, the grid component. As you can see, the grid component has other components inside of them, which are features. These are the default components, the default blocks that we have in our space. So the idea is that we can extend the behavior of this space or create new structures in the block library that we have inside Storyblok that you can access from the inside of this page. If you go to the option, if you go to the white bar that is at the top, if you go to the fourth item counting from the right, from the left, yeah, the block library, if you click there, you will see all the available blocks. Probably the resolution. I think that you can drag and drop that to see that in a very way. There we go. Awesome. So what you can see there, we have four block types: the feature, the grid, the page, and the teaser. The page itself is also a block type.
Okay.
They can be of different block of different types. I mean, you have the content type, which is something that you use to define the template for the story or the page, let's say. And then we have the nested components, which are the ones that you are going to use inside these stories, inside these pages.
Gotcha.
So you can see that we have a page. Yes.
If we want to set something up so we can start doing personalization, what's the right way to go there?
So, I mean, probably what we can have a home page where you display certain content based on a certain criteria for a user. So probably a simple example that we could follow beginning with this space, the blank space, is having a teaser, and we can show that teaser to a certain user. Let's say a message that says, for instance, if you are in summer, it says, hello summer. If you're in winter, grab some tea or something like that. I don't know. So you can, I mean, there are different approaches that we can implement in the headless content management system in particular. As we said, you are consuming the content from an API and displaying it in the front end of your application based on the logic that you're using in your front end. So what we could do, for instance, is create two teasers in the page, one for the winter and one for the summer, let's say. And then in the code of the front end of your application, you can display one or the other based on a certain logic of the code of your application, right? Or based on the visitor of your website.
Got it. So I've got my two teasers, currently winter, currently summer. So I've created two blocks, and then we have this this grid. So if I save this, okay, so now we're saved. I haven't published yet. How would we pull this locally so we can start building it?
Cool. So we can start a project using what technology do you prefer to use?
I know React the best, so that'll probably be fastest with that.
Perfect. Cool. So then we can create a new React project, and I will share with you a couple of URLs that we can follow. But in Storyblok, in the developer relations team at Storyblok, we are creating SDKs to make the work easier for the developers to work with Storyblok and to integrate Storyblok into their projects. These SDKs, we are creating them for different technologies, for different frameworks. One of them is the React SDK that you can use. So following a list of simple steps, let's say, you will be able to connect to your space, bring the content, display that content. And then the cool thing about the visual editor is that we will be able to mark these components as editable, which means that you are able to click on the components in the visual editor and actually edit them inside Storyblok, because it's not only a preview. That you are modifying the values of the properties. You can also interact with the page itself, like clicking the different components and editing them.
Gotcha. So do I want it? Can I use just like Vite?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm gonna create a new project.
Perfect.
And we'll put this in Personalization Storyblok. I'm gonna make it React. I'm not gonna do TypeScript today because nobody wants to watch that. And then we'll npm install. And I don't know if we're gonna end up using any serverless functions or anything, but I'm gonna use netlify dev because that's my default. And that'll give us, sees that we're using Vite. Looks like it started running. I must have something else running somewhere too. What's going on? Something weird is going on. Rather than me trying to figure out what's going on there, I'm just going to use the npm run dev. I think I might have done something with like another app running. Okay, so here's our count. So this is a Vite app. We're running. Everything's good. If I go in here and can open this, and we can see here we've got like our app. So run it again, and then I can put this one to this side and this one to this side. Make them both a little bit shorter so that they don't show off the bottom of the screen. And then I will close this out, and let's just make a little. Okay, so we got a live reloading app up and running.
Awesome.
Great news. I'm very excited about that. So you said there is something I can install to just pull Storyblok in for me?
Yes, it's an npm package that is called @storyblok/react. That's the SDK that we create.
Storyblok React, like that?
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Oh.
What have I done? Unable to resolve dependency tree. Am I missing things? Oh, does it not like React 18?
Oh, yeah.
Let me just do the legacy peer deps and it'll be fine. It likes TL, but it'll be okay. All right, so now we're okay.
Cool. Another thing that we may need to install, this is like temporary, but Storyblok React is using an API client that the product team from Storyblok created in the past, and we are using Axios to do the API calls. So probably you will need to install Axios. I know that the pull request removing Axios from all our SDKs is coming very, very soon, but just to be sure that we have Axios, if you can install it. Cool. That's all that we need to install from the Storyblok point of view, let's say. So what we need to do now is to initialize a connection between our project and the Storyblok the Storyblok space, right? I mean, where your project is living. So if in that case, what we will need to do is to go to I will share that in the chat, but probably this is something that we need to format. But if you go to your index file in the React project, there's a function that is included in the npm package that is called Storyblok init. So if you if you import Storyblok init from the
at the full app level like this?
I mean, before creating the app level, because it's something that you will execute once and it will be used during the project. So you can do that in line 5, for instance, and that should make the magic.
And it was import from Storyblok. What was the import called?
It's Storyblok init.
It's just like init like that? Oh, here.
With Storyblok.
Got it.
Storyblok, yeah, there we go. Cool. And that function receives some parameters. Well, I mean, it receives a JSON object with a list of parameters. Exactly. The first one is the access token. Well, you need to go to your space, you go to the settings menu, and then you go to the, could you go to the top of the page, because there's an option that says visual editor. Oh no, access token, sorry. And then you have the access token, which is, no, if you go below that, there it says token. That's the one that we can use by now. Preview means that you are working on a testing environment or development environment. Gotcha. You can create a public token for the production environment, right? Cool. We have the access token there.
Okay.
There's another thing that you need
hackers,
to import from
dirty
the
hackers.
Storyblok React package, which is called the the API plugin. When you are importing the Storyblok init function from the Storyblok React package, there's another component that is called the API plugin. We are going to use that API plugin to actually call Storyblok API to bring the content. So if you want to use this plugin, you have to actually, in the Storyblok init function, another property of this JSON object, it's called use, and you can put use, and then you send the API plugin between brackets, because it's a module.
Array. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, well, the other property that we need to send, which, I mean, you were complete, that you were filling it correctly, is the component list. What is the component list? What we are going to do with these components is create the list of React components that are going to link with the blocks in Storyblok, and we will tell, I mean, well, this is kind of tricky, but the idea is that we can give the possibility to the code of our application to render the content no matter which type of block we are using in the body of the page, right? So if we have a dynamic body in our page in Storyblok, we have to give the possibility to the front-end editor to dynamically render the content no matter which block type we are using. Because if you're using a home page and I want to link what were the names of the blocks that we are using? We have a teaser, we have a feature, we have a grid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
if I'm creating the home page,
teaser,
exactly.
Grid, feature. Those are the ones we're using.
And page, because it's the template of the page that we are using.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, if we don't use a certain dynamic feature of rendering the content, you will be forced to manually define the structure of your page with the components that you want to use in your page, right? I mean, I have to create a home page with the page component, with a teaser component, with a grid component, and that doesn't give you the flexibility of doing that, or doesn't give you the flexibility of doing it from the inside of the visual editor. So the idea is that these components property will be an array of linking the name of the component in the Storyblok headless CMS and the actual instance of the React component, right? So, sorry, it's not an array. It's like a list with the, yes, exactly. So what you will have there is that a list of, exactly, you will receive page from the Storyblok API, and then you will tell that for this page value that you will receive from Storyblok API, you will render a React page component. So you will need to create a component in a React component called page in this case. And you will need to include that here. Which components do we need to include in this property? The ones that we actually want to be automatically rendered based on what is coming from the Storyblok, and the ones that we want to be able to edit them in inside the visual editor, right? So exactly.
So I'm just gonna get these mocked up so that we can kind of see what's happening here.
Yeah, sure.
And so I have page, and then we'll do another one for teaser. This one needs to be capitalized, and then we need another one for grid, and another one for feature. Oops. Okay, so now we are like, this isn't actually going to work because each of these is kind of, you know, not functional. It's not actually accepting anything, which means that it's going to stop at the page component because nothing ever gets down to these, if I'm understanding correctly. But it should at least give us a page component, right?
Yes, sure. Okay. I mean, you will need to, you will see what happens, but yeah, I mean, in the first test, we will see only the page component because all the other components are inside of the page, and we will need some way of telling that inside the page we can have other components and that we can have a nested architecture of components, right? So, cool. So this is all the configuration that we need to actually connect Storyblok with our application. What we need now is a way of bringing the bringing the content from Storyblok and rendering it based on these logics. So
Right.
to do that, we can go to the application file, the one that you're going to.
How do I actually get this? So I did this init. Do I have to pass this into
Yes.
the app somehow?
No, I mean, that will make, what it's doing is running a certain list of functions that will initialize the connection between your project and I mean, what you are saying there basically is initializing some parameters and bringing the API client that will be used inside the code of your project. So, I mean, we need a couple of functions to be called in the code of your page or your components to actually call the API to actually bring the content and etc. So this is like an initialization of certain parameters based on your application and
Gotcha.
the parameters that you will use to connect to Storyblok.
Gotcha. Okay, so then if I come in here, actually, let's start the server. And then we can come out here and look at this. Right now, if I go in here, what I'm going to want to do is just get this out of here, and we'll do one of these. All right.
Amazing.
And now I don't need this, and I don't need any of that. So now we're looking at a pretty bare bones, simple little app, and I want to bring in my Storyblok stuff. So we initialized it in main, and now I want to actually use it.
Exactly. So to do that, we need two features coming from this same React SDK. So the first one that you are going to import is a function that we call UseStoryblok.
Okay.
That one. And well, now that you are there, we are going to import a component that is called Storyblok component.
This one.
Yes, that one. Exactly.
Okay. This, I thought this was going to help, and it's not helping, so I'm going to move that over. Okay.
Basically, what they do, the UseStoryblok function is going to call the API to bring a certain story or the content related to a certain story and initialize the connection between that story and the content that we are editing inside the visual editor. So what you're going to see whenever you change something in the visual editor, it will automatically be reflected in the instance of your website or the website that you are running, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you are going to need to do, what you will need to do there when loading a page is actually bringing the story of that you want to display, right? Which in our case is the home story. So you send the UseStoryblok, and that function receives different parameters. The first one is exactly the slug of the page that you want to show, which in our case is the home, and then you can send API options that are going to be used in the case that you want to load certain information or another, or filter something, or if you want to show the draft version or the published version of your story. In Storyblok, we differentiate between the draft version and the published version to talk about the version of the content that your end users are visiting and the version of the content that you are editing, right? Which is the draft version. Right. If you send there the parameter version and you send the string draft, what you are going to bring is always the draft version of your story. So that function will bring you a story object which is a JSON object with all the properties that represent the different values and the different properties of your story with all the components inside of them. So that will make the work. On the other hand, what we need to do is actually render the content. So inside there, we are going to use the Storyblok component, and you can send the parameter block to that. Yes, and what you're what you're going to send to this block property is the story, but not only the story, it has a property called content, so it will be story.content. No, sorry, instead of sending the story, story.content. Yeah,
Gotcha.
because you will see the structure of the JSON object that represents the story. The content is what we want to use. We do this because you could use the story, but this Storyblok component is not only for the page itself. It can also be used for the components that you're going to have inside your page. So in the case that you want to render, for instance, the grid that we have in our example, the grid can contain a Storyblok component that will render all the components that has inside of it, and you don't know which type of component they are, so you don't need to specify that.
Okay.
This will make the work, and if you save now, you should see the content that you have in a Storyblok. Well, I mean, yeah, rendering the
Right.
logic.
So we set our page up to be like this. So now what comes in to a Storyblok component page?
So you receive a block there.
Okay.
And the block that you receive, well, you can use the different properties of that block. In this case, you can set, for instance, the block has a body. This body is a list of components. So what you can, it's correct. What you're doing is correct.
Okay.
I mean, what you can render there. Well, basically, I mean, what you have, I mean, the page, your page, the block that represents your page has a body, and this body is a list of blocks. So what you will need to do is mapping this list of blocks to the Storyblok component. I mean, you will render a list of Storyblok components and not only one, right?
Block.body.map.
The block has a body, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then that'll be, we'll just do a B. And then each of those is like that.
Exactly.
Okay. And so then that.
Exactly. Perfect.
Hey, look at it go.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. So then each of these is also going to get
we receive a block.
A block. And then with these, we expect the teaser doesn't have a list of components. So this one I could theoretically just do like block.body. Is that right?
Well,
or
no,
is it something
that's the
else?
point. If you go to Storyblok, exactly. If you go to Storyblok now, you will see that each one of these blocks has their own properties and their structure. If you go to the top right corner on the, oh no, if you close that, I mean, that's one way of saying that. But if you go to the top right corner, like at the right of the button publish, you have an arrow that is pointing down. Yes, you have the draft JSON and the publish JSON, which is what we were talking before. You have a draft version of the story and a publish JSON. If you click on the draft JSON, you will open what is actually your story, right? I mean, that is actually your story with the different properties and the different values for those properties. So what you can see there is that your story has the content property that we used. This content has a body. If you open that content property that you have there, we have a body. This body has a list of blocks, and each one of these blocks has a component. This component field, the property component, the first one, is the string that you are going to use in the list of components that we were using in the Storyblok init, right? So
Gotcha.
you see that the property component tells you which type of component you are rendering. And then you have the different properties based on the type of the component. So you have the headline for the teaser, for the columns is the property of the grid. So you will have, again, like the page,
so
you will have a list of
columns. Actually, I'm just going to copy this. And this one would be columns. And
exactly.
Same thing. And then with this one, we want
I think
block.name is what I saw.
Yeah, name, exactly.
Okay, so let's get back out here and take a look. Hey, all right. So these will be column H2s. That way we get, all right. So a little more setup there. And then if we take this and pull it over, then what we should see, so if I do something like this and save, and okay, so I don't have my live reload going, but I do have it hot updating here when I refresh. which is pretty
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly. Exactly. The cool thing, or not the cool thing, but what we try to do to the content editors is exactly what you just did, but without having to refresh the page whenever you are changing the content, and being able to do that from the inside of Storyblok. So we do have a way of doing this, of doing that right now. There's another function that you can use from the SDK in the code of your application that is called Storyblok editable. That is coming from the same npm package. So if you are in the place where we define our components, no, because you have to define that
In the
at a
components.
component level, because you need to mark which components do you want to edit. So you use Storyblok editable, and that's actually a function that you have to add to the markup of each one of the elements that you want to edit, right? So if you go, well, in the case of the page, probably it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you, yeah, I mean, because you are not going to click on the page. But if you go
So
to the
like that?
teaser, no, the Storyblok editable function has to be in the tag, in the HTML tag. So if you go to the H1 and you add the call to the Storyblok editable, I mean, you can add like something like this. Let me share with you
like
in the chat.
around
Probably
the markup here.
oh, let me see. I don't know if you have access to the chat of this application.
Let me go look.
I share with you.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, so I want to do it inside like this, but then spread.
Yes, spread, and then, well, I mean, you have to close the but just what. No, I mean, what you said is, well, probably, yeah, it was not super clear, my example, but you need to do something like this. Let me share with you. So this Storyblok editable function will receive the block, because what it's doing in the background is adding some data attributes to the element. So there you have the H1, and then, no, what you need to send is the block, I mean the block element to the Storyblok editable function. And then you need to actually render the content inside of it. I mean, this Storyblok editable logic that we are adding now is basically to be able to click on the elements and recognize the elements inside the visual editor.
Like that.
I mean, yes, that exactly like that.
Ah,
So,
okay. All right. Long walk for me to get there, but we got there. All right. So then
yeah,
we got one of those. We got one of these, and that should do it, right?
Yes, probably we can do the same in the grid, but you will need to add a wrapper HTML element in the case that you want to click on the grid. Probably if it's a list, I don't remember how did you define the grid HTML element.
So the grid was just a map like this.
Oh no, the grid. Yeah, no, sorry, the grid there. Probably if you add a wrapper div or something like that, you are able to click on the grid too. So you can, in the case that you want to click on the grid and edit it. But I mean, that's in the case that you want to do that.
Okay.
There we go.
Nope. Gotta do one of these. There we go. Okay. So
perfect. Cool. So yes, what we need to do now is actually set the preview inside the visual editor. So instead of using the URL that says quickstart.me.storyblok.com, what you need to set there is where the front end of your application is living. So what you need to do is change the URL and set your local host. So you will need
so
to
I got one of these. Go in here.
Yes.
Editing. There.
Yes.
Saving. And
but there's one thing that we will need to double check. Go to the visual editor and let me see, because what I wanted to show you is that for security reasons, the Storyblok team decided that it is more secure for you to point to an HTTPS instance of your application instead of an HTTP instance. So what I mean, one way of work around in this when working locally is setting an HTTPS proxy. If you don't know how to do that, you have the steps there. If you don't have anything installed to run a local HTTPS proxy, If not, you can install. I mean, you can see there that there is. You can create a certificate. You can add the create a proxy using a different port pointing to your application. That will be another method. I mean, those are the suggestions that we use from the Storyblok team. This is for the version 2 of Storyblok that we are doing this. If you want to use the HTTP version of your code, we can go back to the version 1, which is totally fine in the case that you don't want to
I think
install the.
we have about like 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have time for the personalization. So let me.
Sure.
How do I?
No, if you go, back to version 1, sure, that's way easier. So if you go to the content, the home, yes. And there you go, it should load your page. Okay, so now you can see the borders. If you click on them, you load them, and you can actually edit them and see the change in real time. What is cool about this is that if you now add a new button, a new block to the body of the page or to the grid, you will actually see the changes being implemented in real time, because you put there the dynamic body, right? So you go there and you can.
Cool. Yeah. All right. I get it. I'm gonna drop this one out because it's semantically nonsense. But let's go ahead and save that, and then let me fix this one real quick. And I want to make this function.
Perfect. So yeah, I mean, from the Storyblok point of view, this is ready. So now what we need to do is actually the personalization logic. So
right.
So we will need to see. I mean, that's a very good question. What we need to do is, in a certain way, define if you are in summer or if you are in winter in the code of your application, and based on that, show one component or the other, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this for the sake of. Let's do this for the sake of this demo.
Perfect.
Right? Because we're not going to have time to get any geo in here. So
no, well, that's true.
we can do this in the way that I would. Did that work? You good? What's going on?
It's not loading.
Yeah, it looks like it didn't load. That's fine. We'll just refresh the page. That's how I solve my problems. Did I kill this thing? What's going on? Oops. Let's see. Storyblok doesn't like whatever I've done.
Oh, what happened?
I don't know. I'm getting waiting for Storyblok timeout. Let's stop. Maybe stop the server. Try it one more time. Okay.
There we go.
There we go.
Whoa.
All right. So now what we want to do is we need to pull out some logic. So what I'm going to do is now can be a new date. And we want to check if, let's see. I'm going to do this in the console because I always forget how date works, but we can do, so if I get like date equals new date, right? Then we can do a date get current month. If I can spell it right, come on now. Get current, get month, right? So it says what month we're in. All right, so this is always confusing. It is July, but it says month 6 because it's 0 indexed, which is so freaking confusing. So we will define, I don't know what the exact dates are, but we'll say May, June, July, August, right? That feels like summer.
Yes,
You're from
yes.
Argentina. Why am I
Yeah.
asking you?
I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
we'll
mean, I
we'll
was.
say summer months north, and that is May, June, July, August. We'll make that count, right? And then what we can
Yeah.
do, and we can say const is summer will be summer months includes. Is that right? Includes? Yeah, we're gonna try it. Now get month. And then I'm just gonna log this and make sure that it actually is doing what I want. It is summer. Okay, so now that we know that it is summer, we can make a call
Nice.
inside of here, which needs to check whether or not, how are we going to do this? So we'll have to say, I'm going to just,
What you can do, I mean, you can add a property to the.
okay, yeah, let's solve it for real. Let's go back into Storyblok here, and then I need to edit this
Yes.
field.
No, in
schema.
the teaser, because that's the one that is going to be different.
Oh, you're right.
Right?
Yeah, back.
So you go, oh, sorry, in the content.
Content.
Oh, well, it's the same. I mean, you can do that from the inside of the visual editor or outside. But yeah, if you go to components now that we are there, you go to the teaser and you can add there a property. No, that's a tab. Sorry. If you cancel there, you can add a field at the top that where it says enter a key value. You can put there, summer. Add it and you can edit it. You can select the field type.
Boolean.
You can put it Boolean. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Yeah, good.
You can save the schema with the button.
Okay.
Cool. So now we need to go to the actual page.
And we've got
and you
this
can
one
set that
is
that's
not
for
summer.
summer. No.
This one is summer. So we'll save
Yes.
that. And then if I want to get my draft JSON, and we'll look at the preview down here again so that I can see it more easily. Here's my preview, story, content. And here's my block is just going to have a dot summer. Okay. So I can then check in here if block.summer equals.
Yeah, you probably need to double check. Sorry, you need to check if the block has a summer property, because for instance, the feature or the grid components, they don't have a summer property. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, has own property. Does that one work?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it should.
And the summer does not equal is summer. So that would be the opposite.
Exactly.
Okay, right. Exactly. So that should fix it. And then it is currently summer in the northern hemisphere. Okay, let's change our range of months. And so that's going to be summer north, but we can do summer south. What are the summer months? Would that be like?
Well, it's December, which is yeah, exactly. January, February, and March, probably.
Okay, so we're gonna pretend that I've renamed my values correctly, and now it is not summer in Argentina. Okay, great. So I'm gonna just rename that, and then we'll uncomment this one, and there we go. Okay, so we have this is like very rudimentary. This is great. We've got personalization running, and it's running in a way that's tied into a CMS, and it didn't take, like, again, look at this. There's nothing personally identifying here outside of the fact, I guess, that we would need to know if you were in the northern or southern hemisphere, which we could get from like course, just the server you're connecting to, right? Not like anything to do with you specifically. So this is pretty, like, I find this to be pretty exciting because it shows the I guess the lack of deep detail that is required to do useful personalization. And again, like what we've done here is just toggled some text, but it would be pretty interesting if if this is a company that has like a summer function and a winter function, like a clothing store, I can show the summer or winter collection based on where somebody's coming in from the world. And that suddenly makes the site just a little bit more relevant, right? And I feel like, especially when you're working in a global context, that little bit of stuff makes such a big difference. Like, imagine, every website's trying to put personality in. And so we're all doing stuff like saying, like, instead of our app being like, greetings, human, it's very much like, hey, Jason, what's up? Right. And that's a very like American a way to do that. But if your site was greeting people like, when somebody shows up in Spain, it was like hola instead of what's up, or even, or like you want to keep it casual, like whatever, like que pasa, whatever. There's so many options for ways to make this feel a little more yours, right? And I think that is definitely a good addition. I'm being told that greetings humans is a Disney bit. So great. I await my copyright takedown.
Nice.
So okay, so I think we might be out of time to do any more coding. So where should people go if they want to learn more?
Sure. Well, in Storyblok, if they want to learn more on how to code, there's a website that they can go, which is storyblok.com/developers. If you are a developer, of course. We have storyblok.com/docs in the case that you want to read things more generic, let's say, and not only developer focused. But those are, I would say, that the main starting points, because the developers page has links to the different technology hubs that we are maintaining in Storyblok.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the project, depending on the framework that you want to use, or depending on the programming language, we have different tutorials, we have guides, we have code samples, we have the SDKs that you can learn how to use them. So yeah, basically, I would say that the developers page is a good starting point. I wrote an article on how to create a very small personalization project using Next.js. In the case that you want to use it with Storyblok,
Mm-hmm.
you can look at that in the Next.js hub, technology hub that we have in Storyblok. So if you go there, you will see that. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, yes, if you go to no, sorry, that's a new page that we created and that we are working on. But if you go to the storyblok.com/developers,
Okay.
and you go a little bit below, you will see that we have the hubs. The first one, the Next.js hub. You will see Sam's face. We have, again, tutorials on how to connect with Storyblok in 5 minutes, or how to create a multi-language project, which is very interesting. That one related to the same thing about personalization. I mean, showing the content in different languages. That's the article. I mean, how to personalize your project using Next.js. So you will learn how to implement. I mean, it's a very small project that you can see
Mm-hmm.
exactly the example that you mentioned before, Jason, on showing sportswear or elegant clothing, depending on what you are visiting. And one approach that we take as an example to show you how to implement that with Storyblok. But again, it will depend on how you want to implement that, how you want to create the project. Um, I don't want to be repetitive, but there's the recording of the talk that Jason presented at Render Atlanta, which is a very similar use case, but with a different approach on how to solve it. So you can take a look at it too. You can watch the
Do those end up?
recording, which is
Are those on YouTube? I actually haven't found these recordings.
yes, they are in YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. let's
Not
find this
related to
thing.
personalization, but I also presented a talk at the same event. So if you want to see, to watch the recording, it is in the Render Atlanta channel too. So if you want to learn about headless CMS, the concept of headless, and how to connect a remix project to headless CMS, which is Storyblok, you can watch the recording too. Um, there you go. There's your recording, and mine is
Where
the
am I?
one.
Did
If
I
you
just?
go, yeah,
Here's
at the left
yours.
of the Ken Wheeler. Yeah, that's mine.
Here's me. Okay. All
Um,
right. Got real confused
exactly.
there. All right. So here's Facundo, and here's mine, and this one is about specifically about kind of like personalization, but personalization is the use case to show this idea that that a front end dev without I think a whole lot of deep experience in middle and back end stuff can really build a lot of complicated stuff. This was a really fun one, so I hope y'all go watch it and give it a try. And yeah, headless stuff is also always very powerful, so definitely worth checking out there. Let me do a quick shout out. Make sure you go and give Facundo a follow on Twitter. And
Thank you. Thank
while
you.
you're looking at things on the internet, make sure you head over and look at the schedule. We've had Rachel with us from White Coat Captioning all day, taking down all the words we're saying. Thank you very much, Rachel. And that's made possible by Netlify, NX, and New Relic, all of whom are kicking in to sponsor this show, which means a lot to me. Check out that schedule while you're on it, because we've got some really fun stuff coming up on the show. We're going to do motion. We're going to do Rust. We're going to do visual page building. We're going to do accessibility testing, and a whole bunch more that I think is going to be a whole lot of fun. So please make sure you mark your calendars and subscribe, follow, do all the things that you do so that you can be part of it when it comes out. Right? Right. Okay. With that, Facundo, I think we are at time. So is there any parting words for the chat?
Oh, well, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something new, at least a small piece. And no, I mean that you get into the idea of personalization, which is pretty interesting. I think that there are a lot of people, how to say, learning about it, implementing it. We at Storyblok, we see a lot of customers asking about how to implement personalization in their projects. So it looks like a trend in the market, I would say, or a buzzword that everybody is asking about that. So yeah, I hope again that you learned something new and you enjoyed this show. And Jason, of course, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the show.
Of course. Happy to have you. Thanks for hanging out. All right, chat. I think we're going to go find somebody to raid. Let's see who's live right now. And we will see you all next time.